Hey, Jack.
Hi, Jonathan. How are you?
Good. How's it going?
It's good.
Good. I got my crazy little camera here.
All right.
And I think some more students are going to come in and join my small class, but they're just finishing up something and we'll get going here in a minute. But how are you doing today?
Doing well. It's hot here. It's probably hot there.
Yeah, it's muggy. We got a huge thunderstorm rolling in as usual in the
Nice.
Iowa summer.
Yeah.
And, but it's supposed to be blistering hot as usual tomorrow for our trip to the Johnson County Fair tomorrow afternoon.
Nice.
We end up going. But
That'll be a fun time for reporting.
yeah, we're gonna go out there and make up some work on social media and do some posts about what's going on at the fair.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. That'll be cool.
Yeah.
You know, last week I did that online advisor workshop. You know, the whole week. It was literally the first time I've ever taught the Iowa advisor workshop where there hasn't been a thunderstorm that sent people to a basement or something. Like one of the people online would have to break off and race to save their lives.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, well, if it didn't happen this week, it's bound to happen next week.
Mm-hmm. No, we're off to a good start here. They're working on redesigning their websites, and we did a little post using Google Maps of all the ice cream and coffee shops and everything around Iowa City, and got them using the WordPress site. And I was hoping you could just talk to them a little bit about good storytelling. And like, I think, you know, when I was at the tech conference, there's a big theme about how, you know, just because you post something on the web, you can't just post anything. You know, you still have to have quality, good stories on there. And I think sometimes that gets lost a little bit in the, you know, we're doing just teaching kids to use the web is good, but we still have to have the good stories that go along with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, you know, we can talk about it. I hope they'll have some questions. That'll make it, you know,
yeah.
More.
And I think I just got a text from Matt Schott, and he's coming up here. So let me find him. He's a little lost, and then we can get going in a couple minutes.
All right.
So Matt says the door's you invited Matt Schott. On the west side. Okay. All right. I think we're 2 minutes from the other class joining us, so should be good.
All right.
Have you had a busy summer with your camps, or what have you been up to?
You know, I don't travel around and do too many camps anymore. I only do them right here and in Colorado, and you know, so I've been kind of lazy, quite honestly. Although we have had this whole thing changing the name of the association. You know,
oh yeah,
I've had to learn a million things. I had to, you know, I don't know. I got some help. Like SNO helped us with the website thing. They just kind of moved everything. But then I found all these broken links. I'm still finding them.
Oh man. Yeah. We brought that up at Iowa High School Press, and hey, come on in. And everybody seemed pretty set on keeping it as just press, but
yeah,
I don't know. We'll see. All right, Jack, do you know Matt? He just walked in with his class.
I do.
Hey, Jack, how are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah? How's things in Colorado?
They're hot.
Yeah? They're that here, too.
So
We're about to get some rain, evidently.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if we hear tornado sirens in the middle of this, we may have to run out.
Yeah. You're in a good spot, though. No windows, I assume.
third floor, but it's all right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll introduce you here, and if you want to give a little spiel on storytelling and whatever you want to talk about, would be great. And then I think they have some questions, hopefully, for you.
All right.
All right. So Jack Kennedy is looking at you through this camera right here, and they can see you up on, if you can see yourself over on the wall, some giant TVs in here. So
That's the best way to see me is actually, yeah, a giant TV.
So this is Jack Kennedy. He was my mentor in journalism and a longtime City High advisor before he wandered the earth and ended up in Colorado. And I'm really lucky to have him Skype, video chat, Google Hangout, whatever you want to call it, in today. And one of the things, I'm teaching digital journalism, and Matt, what's your title?
Culture writing.
Culture writing. And I really wanted to hit, we've been doing a lot of tech stuff today, and just the importance of quality storytelling and how to tell really good stories. Because when I was at a tech conference earlier this summer, they were saying, you know, just because you publish something on the web doesn't mean it's worthy of being published and whatnot. And we still need really good quality stories and good writing in general. So I definitely wanted to take a minute and let Jack kind of tell you a little tips, hopefully, on good storytelling and writing for you guys and our digital journalism students. So I'll turn it over to Jack Kennedy.
All right. Well, it's good to be talking with you all. I have actually been in the very room you're in many, many times. Well, not many, many times, I guess, but for a number of years. I spent my first 50 years living in Iowa City, where I was born, at Mercy Hospital, etc. So went to Regina High School, taught at City High, so there you go. Is anyone where, I don't know where people are from, and it's gonna be hard to make this a discussion or anything. So I'll just yak on until you start asking me questions. Fair enough? And you can always raise your hand and just holler something. Here's about there are a zillion things we could talk about in the details of writing a good story, but the most important thing to keep in mind is that there are no stories about things or places or events. There are only stories about people. I hope that you can learn this faster than I learned it. It seemed to take me forever to figure out. I can remember us having all these conversations on the Little Hawk where people would say, "Well, who's gonna cover the girls' basketball story, or who's gonna cover the chess club meeting, or pick something?" And people would raise their hands tentatively, and one of the editors, whoever was running the session, would say, "Good, we've got that covered." And then it was at that point when the real conversations would have to start, because there are no stories about girls basketball. There's only stories about girls basketball players and coaches and the wives and husbands of coaches, and there's parents that are involved, and there's fans, and there's managers, and well, you get the idea. Once you start realizing that, then you'll start having different kinds of conversations with the other people that are with you on the staff. You'll say, let's not even use the word story when we do our brainstorming. I think that was a hard habit to break. What we started to do was, who's going to do the girls' basketball coverage? And that's what allowed us to start having this talk that would include much of what you in this very room are thinking about now, which is, okay, well, maybe the best way to do the coverage would be to grab a camera and take some photos. Don't know. For some of you, it might be, hey, we should do something. We should just send out a series of tweets. We should live tweet the event or something, or perhaps it's we need to, shoot some quick video interviews. Whatever it might be, you have more options when you use the word coverage rather than story. If you recall, somewhere in your dim dark past as English students, I'm pretty sure you were forced to memorize the definition of what a story is. Which is, well, let's see. It has 4 parts. It has setting, it has characters, it has conflict, and it has resolution. Does that sound at all familiar? I don't know. I actually can see you, so it's okay if you nod or something, or just go, Jack, shut up. But at any rate, you know, when we think about the word story like that, that's not what you actually see very often in the Daily Iowan or the Press Citizen or the Des Moines Register or the Chicago Tribune or whatever paper you tend to pick up. We don't see very many stories. I doubt that there are very many stories in today's paper. Not stories the way I just defined them. But what there are is reports. And I'm not sure that I was very interested in journalism and being a guy who just did these great reports. I actually wanted to tell stories. And so stories would be my chance to actually develop some kind of a narrative arc. So I would encourage all of you, whether you're writing about popular culture, which is a pretty fascinating thing to write about, or if you're going out to cover the county fair, which oh my gosh, I've been there many, many times. Go to the county fair tomorrow and do your reporting. You need to come back with stories about people, and they'll be willing to share them with you if you simply ask. So, well, once we do that, then it's just a question. Once you kind of come to grips with that idea that stories are always about people, and if you don't have people, you don't have stories. You're just writing a report. Then I think automatically your coverage is going to get better, because it's all going to. You won't feel comfortable just live tweeting scores from the big game that's going on. You certainly won't feel comfortable sending a series of Facebook messages about, and now they're showing the calves at the county fair. It's so exciting. They're coming out even now. That will not be that will not be enough for you. You will have to go and find whoever that little kid is. He's about 8 years old, and he's dwarfed by this cow that he's leading in from a pen somewhere, and the judges are about to check it out, and the kid is just beaming, and you have got to find out why. Why are you so excited about this? This is just like not even in my realm of experience why you would care about this. But that kid has spent hours and months of his life grooming and growing and feeding this particular calf or whatever it might be. Kind of get the idea? So there you go. That's what I know about storytelling in a nutshell. If you've got people involved, I imagine you're going to have more fun, and you're going to collect more readers. What that means is you have got to interview and get them to talk to you, so you can pass that on. You can pass it on in print, or in text, but you can also, I imagine you'll be yanking out your phone or a camera or something and getting some video clips. You'll be inviting people to, you'll be inviting them to let you take their photograph, like an environmental portrait. Be the perfect thing for tomorrow, your field trip. Those of you who are going to the county fair, while you're talking to people, you'll be taking photos of them in the environment where they're comfortable, and then you can just automatically start asking questions about why are you doing this? What got you to this point? I hope that makes some sense. This would be a great time for you, though, if you have some questions, to go ahead and ask them, especially the folks who are doing the cultural. You're writing about culture. I'd be interested to know, like, what are you working on, or I don't know what. How do you think you're going to bring in people in culture stories that you're covering? I can share one while you're thinking, if you want. So last night I was in Boulder. In Boulder, I'm about an hour and 20 minutes. I'm about as far away as you can be from Boulder and still be in the Denver metropolitan area. But anyway, we went up there, and because we always go to the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, kind of like the Riverside Shakespeare Festival in Iowa City that's probably over by now. It's outdoors. It's an outdoor theater with a complete stage, etc., professional actors, and a mix of students and professionals. And it was the play Much Ado About Nothing. Perhaps you've heard of it. A very funny Shakespeare classic. So I'm watching the show, and I realize hey, I know one of those actors up there. And it turned out it was this young woman named Elise Collins, and she goes to the same church I go to. I've known her since she was a little girl. We've actually been in church musicals before, and I know her parents. And so I was thinking to myself, well, this will be really great. So she comes out in the very first scene. The show started at 6:30. And I don't know if you can picture how the set is, but it's sort of on three sides of this square that the theater lies in. There are buildings, campus buildings at CU Boulder. And the sun is setting in the west, but it hasn't gotten down low enough at 6:30 to be below the building to the west. And she just happened to be standing in the worst place. She was literally looking directly into the sun in the first scene. I could just watch her eyes watering, and she was trying to smile, and she was a supporting role, not a major role, but she was trying to do her best to fight the sun, and there was literally nothing she could do. I actually watched her move. There was a very tall woman playing the part of Beatrice, and she actually moved to a point where Beatrice could actually block the sun for her for just a little while for some relief. For me, that's the story I was thinking about after it was over. It was a wonderful production. I could have written a review about it, talked about how wonderful the guy playing Benedict was, and the guy playing Dogberry, and all the characters, and I could have gone and interviewed them and what have you. But that one little story of one young woman fighting the sun just for a few minutes at the beginning of a production was the one that stuck with me. I'm going to suggest that many times that's exactly the story that needs to be told, and no one else is going to be able to tell it if you don't, because you were there. So I'll just, this is the time for some questions. I'll pause right here.
All right, guys. Question for you. Why am I getting feedback? I'll stand away. Maybe.
Keep going.
Further. Okay, it stopped. Good. So what question you guys have about like telling good stories? One thing, like I was always in awe when Jack was an advisor. They had amazing stories in the Little Hawk, and that's one thing that I try and get my students to do every issue is to do the big stories, have 2 or 3 really good stories about people at City High that have really interesting stories to tell, whether it's the school play or whatever's going on. And I know digital media has talked about how it's kind of a struggle to tell good stories or find good stories at their school. They say there's nothing going on, and I don't believe them. But you guys have a question about, like, you guys think there's nothing going on or something to do with that? Or what are you guys doing for culture writing?
What were you guys just out doing today? Come on, you guys were so talkative before, and now your Jack's here and you're not talking.
We were taking like pictures and like getting an idea of, like, we interviewed a store and kind of like got an idea of what the store.
When you go up and look at Jack, just, you don't have to stand like right by it, but like just 10 feet in front of it. It's weird to be talking to people and not see them.
Okay.
You don't have to stand like right in front of the mic, but like just so talking to that robot thing over there.
Okay, we like interviewed people and we kind of like got an idea of like what they like did at the store and stuff.
Oh, that's fun.
It was to the assignment was to find a place on the Ped Mall and to be able to write a short profile of that place. So they were out interviewing for most of the afternoon doing that.
Well, so let me get this straight. So this is sort of like a Humans of Iowa City kind of approach, or
kind of. I mean, they could pick the shop. It didn't have to be a shop. It could have been a restaurant. It could have been anything, and then just be able to tell a story from what they found there, whether it was about how that business came to be, whether it was about the owner of the store and how the store was created, just anything like that.
Sure. Yeah. Well, our best luck in those things almost always involved investing a huge amount of time. I don't know if that's what the young reporters there have experienced, but it tends to be that when you come rolling in and you just want to fire off some questions, people find that's, well, it's not smooth, is it? I don't know how the reporters feel about this, but let's say you walk into Prairie Lights bookstore or Jimmy John's, or I'm just thinking of what's on the corner there. There's the comic book store, and there's a zillion things. So you're walking in and you start talking to people about the history of the business or something, and I think the very first thing they look at you and do is go, "Why do you care about this? What? Like I'm not prepared to talk to you about this." And so I found that my students, what you almost have to do is win the trust of your subjects by spending some time just saying, "Do you mind if I hang out and kind of watch what goes on until I have, well, enough familiarity with what's going on here that I actually have some questions I can ask you that go off of my prepared questions," for instance. How many of you reporters prepare questions before you go out for an interview? Do you prepare like a list of 8 or 10 questions or more to take with you? Yeah, I think that's very common. And how many of you find that you stick with your script, so to speak? You work your way through your questions because, well, those are your questions. You don't just like stop, do you?
Naomi, you're shaking your head a little bit.
Well, like I find that if I write out a bunch of questions, like a lot of the times when I'm interviewing someone and they're giving me like answers, like I try to look like with the answer that they gave me to see if there's a better question that I could be asking rather than what I wrote down. Because sometimes when you write stuff down, you write like broad general questions that'll get like a general answer.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm a great believer in. I've taken these. My sources for this, by the way, include people from the Poynter Institute for Media Studies, a guy named Don Fry, who wrote a book on coaching writing, but also Roy Peter Clark and some other folks. And I actually think your preparation for doing an interview is more important than writing down questions. I think the best interviews they're more like conversations. Give and take. You ask what is sort of, well, it's what comes up as you're talking to someone. So you're at Prairie Lights bookstore and you're talking to a person who's worked there a very long time, and the person sort of mentions, maybe you ask some starter question like, what's your favorite thing about working at this particular place? And you get an answer, and the answer is, you know, I really like meeting the authors that come through Iowa City, perhaps. And then, what's the next question? I'm pausing for you to think about that. So the person says, my very best first thing. This is all the person says to you when in the interview. You ask the question, what's your favorite thing about working at Prairie Lights bookstore, perhaps one of the most famous independent bookstores in America? And the person answers you with this statement: I like meeting the famous authors that come through here quite regularly. And then the person stops. So now, do you go back to your reporter's notebook and pull the next question? Or actually, can we just put our notebook away? Or at least just have it in front of us? What is your next question?
Who's got it?
It would probably be something like, who are like the more famous authors that have come through, or like who's been like their personal favorite author? Or, like, how do they choose authors to come to the bookstore?
Those are all really good questions. So I'd pick one. It'd be just like having a conversation with someone you're meeting for the first time. I would often say this to my students, and I hope I won't offend you. I often do offend students and teachers, but imagine this. Imagine you were on a first date. Has anyone been on a date? Oh, see, that's where I might be offending you. But okay, let's just assume you have. So they're awkward, aren't they? Aren't they a tiny bit awkward? Do you tend to take a reporter's notebook with you when you go on a first date, so you can jot down some things, and then you keep running some notes, so you can go, wait, let's see. He mentioned something about he really likes weightlifting. Maybe I should come back to weightlifting a little later in the date when it's appropriate. It'll be very romantic. We can talk about the bar. But anyway, the point I'm saying, I think a good interview is closer to a conversation. And I think if you actually pay attention and at least pretend to be interested in what the person you're interviewing has to say, you'll come up with the next question. I just don't think people tend to sit there and go, I have absolutely nothing to say. Your source will actually give you all those ins. But here's what sources don't usually do, unless they are on Google Hangout and they're feeling like they need to fill dead air. They don't just keep on yakking. They will stop. Your source will simply give you the minimum response. And I think that's because most people are just trying to find out if you're really interested. Like, do you really want me to talk about some famous authors I've met at Prairie Lights? If you do, I can, but I just don't want to bore you. That's what I'm talking about. So the very essence of storytelling is to get a story to tell, and you'll have to do that by interviewing. Okay.
And I got a question on that. We've kind of been talking, there seems to be a trend in our critiques and stuff to have for online digital media, like you want short, brief news stories or like the big, long, features story that's going on. I don't know, what do you think about that? And also, like, I think it's pretty hard for my students when you're like, okay, you're either going to write a breaking news story and provide, important news information right now on the web and social media, or like try and write this 1,000-word epic, piece. So I think maybe thoughts on that, and also like, how do you approach like a giant in-depth story like
Sure. Well, first of all, you're talking to the guy who loves giant in-depth stories. My gosh, I've sort of always left the door open for students of mine to write about as much as they want to write. I've had students write 5,000-word stories before. So I'm that guy. I'll be glad to talk about it. But I also am this guy, and I didn't really think I would come around to this, but I'm starting to get it. How many of you in this room believe that most of your fellow students are going to consume their news this coming school year mostly on their phone? Well, that looks nearly unanimous, and so I think that's the reason why the critiquers and the judges and the thinkers in digital media, for instance, are looking at short. Because how much do you want to read on your phone? And by that I mean, how much do you want to scroll through on your phone? And I'm just not, see, that was not even a question in journalism like 10 years ago, I don't think. I think most people 10 years ago would have said, well, that's that weird little thing. Yeah, a few people have tablets and phones, but we're mostly still publishing for print. So when it's time to do the in-depth story, well, that's going to be a photo essay with lots of text surrounding it. We can provide tons of space in our news magazine or newspaper or yearbook or whatever it might be, and then we could talk about how you break that up into chapters and what have you. But now I think we really have gotten to this point where if it's not really if what you're covering does not have this big narrative arc, which can take you through some kind of character growth, like you can actually watch a person change over time, then I'm just not sure that you've got something that can be a big in-depth piece. You can certainly have a complicated report that has lots of pieces to it, I suppose, in which case, if you were doing it on a website, I suppose you could set it up in such a way that your links would sort of connect one, you'd have your lead story and you'll connect, or you could have pull downs, or you can go to some video clips you can bring. So to produce the big in-depth story, you just provide like 20 different shorter pieces. But I'm not sure very many people are actually going to read your stuff on your website. So I think you have to be thinking of the phone. And then that's why I'm in favor of also combining all your digital media, all your social media platform work with something in print. Because I think print is ideal for the longer piece, if that makes any sense. And so I think the smart journalism programs and the smart journalists figure out ways to do all of those things when it's appropriate, if that at all makes sense. But I in passing, I just mentioned for the longer in-depth story, chapters. Even if you're doing a longer piece, I still think you want to chunk it in some way, or in some way you want to split it up into like scenes, or this is going to be one area I'm going to focus on, one person I'm going to focus on, and then I will have another chapter where I'll pull another person. But let's face it, you can't do the big in-depth piece without spending loads of time. So, for instance, the biggest pieces I've ever had a student do almost always involved what I would call immersion journalism. That is, I had students who would spend the week leading up to the opening night of the school musical for the culture writers. So the school musical is West Side Story or whatever it is, or Sound of Music, doesn't matter, but you've got 100 people in your school involved. They're in the orchestra, the pit orchestra, they're backstage, they're on stage, all that stuff. If you're not careful, you'll just do hit and run journalism, which would simply be we'll do 180 words on blah blah blah, and we'll call it the musical's coming, and then we'll do a link to here. You can learn more about the history of Sound of Music by going here, and here's the cast list. You can just click on this, and you can see. If you're not careful, that's what we end up doing, and I don't think people are very riveted by that. I think they actually want real stories. So when you find out that the lead, if you're actually going to go and spend time, like you're just going to be there like the cast is. And I'll ask this question of you, and you don't have to answer. It's a rhetorical question. But if you want to do a big in-depth story, which is the kind that wins the awards, but more importantly, wins the hearts of readers and actually makes you proud, like you go, I'll never forget reporting on that school musical, it almost always involves you dedicating 4 hours a day for like 5, 6, 7 days in a row. Just reporting, just watching and listening, and occasionally asking some questions, but mostly just being there. Because eventually stuff will happen if you spend enough time. I think the real problem with student journalism, and all of you in this room should take this as a personal challenge, and you're going to show up that old guy from Denver that you can do this. The real problem with student journalism is that student journalists are not willing to spend enough time reporting. People want to get it done and move on to the next thing. And maybe there's all sorts of pressure, from so many areas that sort of takes away that time from you. But if you really want to do something that's amazing, it's going to take a lot of time. It may even take a group of people working together, dividing up some of the time, if that makes any sense, so that you can then come back together and figure out what the story really was. A huge mistake is thinking that when you go off to downtown Iowa City to find some people and businesses to tell stories about, that they're just going to pop out at you. Oh man, I've already spent 20 minutes and nothing has really happened yet. Yeah, well, that's actually the way life is. In fact, you may go months without much happening. So, it's just think about what a normal school day looks like to you and tell me how much is going to happen just from you being there. I mean, you've got to hang out. You've got to put yourself in the right place. So I guess John's initial question, which I've rambled about, is that I do think that we've really come closer and closer to this idea in journalism that either it needs in-depth, it needs character development, it needs a real story arc where we move people through what happened and what were you thinking and how did you overcome the obstacles, or it's got to be really short. And that's what all your reports, I think, should be short. Stuff that just can be on the phone. Then it's just the question of where do you put the longer pieces. My opinion, it goes in print.
Yeah,
other question?
There are some new good long-form templates that are getting better online too that I think that are good. You guys have any other questions or what's going on? Culture people, digital media people. You guys asked about like not being able to find stories. You don't think stuff's going on. Do you have an answer for a school in Iowa where they don't think much is happening or finding stories?
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody wants to say that, and it's almost like if you say that, you're just like everyone else in your entire school. There's kind of a culture of nothing happens here, but the truth of the matter is way different, and I think you know deep down that it is. What you're really doing is you're actually internally censoring your investigative or curious side. You're sort of saying, well, there are things that happen in the school, and they could be kind of interesting, but I'm not sure other people think they're interesting. So, well, then I'm going to say nothing ever happens in the school. I would rather you would kind of look to you'd say to yourself, well, where do people spend their time at your school? Where do they spend their time when they're not in a classroom? Where do they do things on campus? And if they don't, where is it happening? Because people they're not going to just sit around and be bored and do nothing during the entire school year. There's lots of things happening. Athletes are spending plenty of time on their activities. There are people who are, even if it's a small rural school in Iowa, people must be doing something on the farm if that's where they are, or they're doing something in their small town. They've got a job. There's always something. Is it earth-shattering news? Well, probably not. But is it interesting stuff that you can actually show how characters are developed? I think you can. So I would never accept that. The idea that nothing's happening. As a matter of fact, I've always had students use a beat system. That's B-E-A-T, as in a police officer on his or her beat. The idea was the police officer most days would just walk around maybe a square mile of a town and get used to it, and no crimes occur. But maybe just one day the officer spots a broken window, and that leads to an investigation, and then you try to figure out who broke the window, and that's when the cops swing into action. It's the same thing for you as reporters. Somebody needs to be an expert on everything that's important in your school, whether it's activities or athletics or academics. So you need to find ways to split your staff responsibilities up so that because no one person can cover all the beats in your school. And by a beat, I mean there might be the theater beat, or the administrative beat, or the library beat, or the science department beat, or the football beat, or you get the idea. In culture, reporters should be, well, of course we have beats. We kind of expect you to be somewhat expert, don't you? Aren't some of you a little bit expert? If you're doing culture writing, then you must be interested in some aspect of culture. Would be, I don't know, I'm just assuming that, I guess. Well, as you become more and more interested in it, you learn more about it, you become more of an expert, and it's like magic. Suddenly, you can do a better job of writing about that beat because you have so much background you can pull from. At the beginning, you don't. But that's why we ask people on our staff to make themselves the experts for our readers. How many of you really want to pull up something on Facebook, or I don't know, some report online and read from an amateur about something that's happening on Broadway or something that's happening in the movies? You know, a new movie comes out, it's a big hit. Don't you want someone who is kind of expert to be the person who writes about it or reviews it? I would. So I'm not actually looking for pure amateurs. I'm looking for you will still be an amateur, I'm sure. So am I. But at least you can be an informed amateur who has learned quite a bit about whatever it is you're reporting on. I'm pausing.
All right, Jack, we're getting close to dinner time here. Anybody got?
I can tell. People look like they've been beat up. Have you guys been out running or something in the Iowa heat?
They're out on the ball for the afternoon.
So yeah, caught him at a little lull time here. But any last questions for Jack about anything? He's a fountain of knowledge. He's a knowledge fountain.
That's me.
All right. Well, I think we're gonna let these guys go eat dinner. But thanks a lot, Jack, and I really appreciate you dropping in.
Good luck to everyone. It was nice talking with you, and I hope you have a great time in Iowa City. Bye, Matt. Bye, John, and everyone. Take care.
See you, Jack.
I'll see you later. Man, I've been in that classroom before.
Oh, yeah?
In the afternoon of a workshop.
Yeah, I've spent the last 7 years, a year in this classroom, so it's becoming my second home outside City High, that's for sure.
I think it's the lack of windows or something after they've been outdoors, and they're just kind of worn out. Probably this is, let's see, this is only like this is day 2, right?
Yeah, this is day 2.
So the initial energy and excitement starts wearing off, and now they've got to get their second wind.
Yeah, they're hitting the wall a little bit here.
It's all good.
Yes, these girls remember when you sang to them in Colorado, Hannah and Tana.
Oh, well, good. I'm glad you do remember.
They're like, yeah, I should have just started. This is the guy that sang the First Amendment in Colorado.
There you go. I'm the same fella.
Yeah.
Yeah, we heard him say a few things that remember from
Yeah.
Good deal. Well, enjoy your time in Iowa City.
Okay.
My hometown. All right.
Take care, Jack.
Bye-bye.
Okay, see you, Jack.
I'm clicking off.
Yeah, me too.